The cabin that time forgot. My girlfriend Lily and I thought we'd hit the jackpot when we found a listing for a cozy cabin tucked deep in the woods. We'd been needing a getaway, some peace and quiet, and we both loved the idea of going off-grid. It was so cheap, though, that I was half wondering if there was some catch. But the owner had great reviews, and the pictures looked incredible, so we figured, why not? The directions were straightforward enough, and soon we were driving up this winding, bumpy road under a thick canopy of trees. The cabin was right where the map said it would be, just as charming as the pictures. An old wooden cabin with a wrap-around porch nestled between towering pines. When we walked inside, it was like stepping back in time. The place was quaint, cozy, filled with knickknacks and furniture from the 1970s. The wallpaper was a faded mustard yellow floral print, and the furniture was all that scratchy plaid fabric that I thought only existed in old movies. But something was off. The air felt stale, like it hadn't been opened in a while, despite how tidy everything was. There was no Wi-Fi, no cell service, and honestly, it felt amazing to disconnect. The owner hadn't mentioned anything about the cabin's history, but we shrugged it off, thinking, old place, lots of charm. We had a nice dinner, played some cards, then decided to go to bed early. Sometime around midnight, I woke up with a jolt. There was this faint creaking sound, like footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the floor above. My heart pounded. This place has an attic? Did you hear that? I whispered to Lily, but she was still sound asleep. I got out of bed quietly and moved toward the staircase at the far end of the hallway, my eyes adjusting to the dark. The sounds continued, small, shuffling footsteps above me. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness as I crept up the stairs. When I reached the top, I pushed open the door to what I assumed was an attic. The smell hit me first. Dust, mildew, and something faintly metallic like old pennies. There was a light in the corner, flickering dimly. I squinted, making out shapes. Old toys scattered on the floor. A rocking chair swaying slightly in the draft. My eyes caught on a framed picture leaning against the wall, half obscured by dust. I wiped it off and my heart almost stopped. The picture was of a family, a man, a woman, and a small boy with thick glasses. But it was what they were wearing that made my stomach twist. It looked like us. The man was in clothes almost identical to mine, a green flannel shirt, dark jeans, even my favorite hiking boots. The woman had a sweater just like Lily's and the same blonde ponytail, and the boy looked eerily familiar too, wearing a pair of glasses that I swear I'd owned as a kid. I staggered back, nearly tripping over something on the floor, but then I heard it again, the creak of footsteps. Only this time, they were behind me. I whipped around to see Lily standing in the doorway, her face pale and her eyes wide. Did you see this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She was pointing to a photo I hadn't noticed before, on the opposite wall. It was the same family, only this time they looked older, more weathered, and they were wearing different clothes. They looked just like us, only from the future. Gray hair, tired eyes, with what looked like our wedding rings glinting in the picture. "We need to leave," Lily whispered, gripping my arm. "This place, it's watching us. We're part of it." My legs felt frozen, but I forced myself to move. We stumbled down the stairs, grabbing whatever we could, and dashed to the car. The cabin stood in silence as we sped down the road, headlights cutting through the dark. I don't know what that place was, but as we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and thought I saw something watching us from the cabin window. Before we move on to the next story, if you're still here, make sure to subscribe, and let me know where you're tuning in from in the comments for more scary stories. Thanks. My dad's story. This story reminds me of something my dad once told us, an experience that chilled me to the bone. When my dad was in his 20s, he still lived with my grandparents. They had a friendly older couple next door. One winter, the wife, Donna, went missing. Her husband came over asking my grandparents if they'd seen her, but no one had. Days later, my dad was playing football with friends at a nearby park when it started snowing heavily. They played in the snow until it became too much and all went home. When my dad got back, he realized his parents weren't there, so he decided to warm up with a shower. When he got out of the shower, he heard a humming sound coming from the living room. Thinking it was his mom, he called out, "Mom?" The humming stopped, but he heard the sound of creaking. He threw on his clothes and went to investigate. In the living room, in my grandfather's rocking chair, was Donna, staring at him. She looked pale, her eyes hollow as she murmured, "It was so cold. I needed to get warm." Startled, my dad ran next door to get Donna's husband. But when they returned to the living room, the chair was empty. Donna was gone. They searched the house, calling her name, but she wasn't there. The next day, Donna's body was found in her husband's crawlspace. She had apparently fallen, hit her head on something sharp, and bled to death. The smell had finally led him to the grisly discovery. What disturbed my dad the most was learning she'd been dead for at least 3 days, meaning the Donna he saw was already gone. Even years later, my dad believes he saw Donna's ghost that day, seeking warmth one last time. He's never been one to make up stories, and the way he told it, I could almost see her there in the chair. That story haunted me for years. Halloween hasn't been quite as exciting since I hit my 30s. At 32, my Halloween night usually involves putting up a few decorations, handing out candy, and watching a spooky movie or two. This year was no different, or so I thought. On Halloween morning, I tidied up my house, picked up candy from the store, and set everything up, ready for trick-or-treaters. I left my front door cracked open so I could hear if anyone came up the steps and started a movie. Our neighborhood is pretty quiet, so I didn't expect a flood of kids, but hours passed without a single one. Finally, at around 6:30 p.m., I heard the doorbell ring. I grabbed the candy bowl and walked toward the door, only to find someone already looking in at me from outside. They wore a strange, blank white mask that hid everything but their eyes. They stared, silent and unblinking, through the open door. It felt unnerving, but I shrugged it off, holding out the bowl and telling them to take some candy. That's when I noticed they were alone. This was no child. The person was taller than a kid, and when I glanced at their eyes, I could see the whites were bloodshot, with deep, dark circles beneath them. Something felt off, but I didn't want to embarrass anyone by calling them out. After taking some candy, they turned and walked away without a word. 15 minutes later, I heard another sound by the door, soft but unmistakably a footstep. Thinking it was another visitor, I got up, but my heart skipped when I saw the same masked figure inside my house, just standing by the front door. "Can I help you?" I managed to ask. The masked figure stared at me, not moving, for a long, unsettling moment before stepping backward and leaving. I was stunned, frozen for a moment before rushing to the door. As he walked down the driveway, he kept glancing back, almost as if he was waiting to see if I was watching him. I quickly closed and locked the door, my pulse racing. Who was this person and what did they want? Before I could gather my thoughts, I heard more footsteps approaching. This time there was no doorbell or knock, just a slow, heavy tread outside. I cautiously looked through the peephole, and there was a man, someone new, appearing to be in his 40s, wearing a brown long-sleeve shirt and jeans. He leaned close to the door and called out, "Hello? I'm looking for my kid. Have you seen them?" Something felt wrong. His eyes were bloodshot and shadowed, dark circles standing out against his pale skin. My heart raced as I realized he looked eerily similar to the figure who had just left. Pretending not to be home, I backed away and called the police, describing everything. After a few tense minutes, I went to check the door. The man was gone, but the police arrived shortly after. We searched around the property and found a white mask hidden in a bush outside. Clearly, it had been discarded in a hurry. The man hadn't just been looking for his kid, he'd been up to something far more disturbing. Though they couldn't locate him that night, I just hope he wasn't able to do whatever he had planned. Seeing him change from one persona to another, showing up 3 times, and then trying to deceive me, left a chilling feeling I'll never forget.